A common and distinctive weapon of commanders in Warhammer 40,000 is a power sword, and in this video we're going to show you a fantastic effect that you can paint onto these weapons to make them really stand out. Now to do this you can start from any undercoat colour that you like. So for our example we're using Mechanica Standard Grey, which you can see my Primaris Captain has been undercoated with. And what we're going to do is first of all base coat the blade of the sword using Stegadon Scale Green. Now I'm going to be applying this using a medium base brush because it's a good size for the kind of area that we want to cover here. And what's really important is that you get as smooth a finish as possible to this base coat. So when you get this ready on your palette, you must make sure you thin it down with some water so it's nice and smooth. Just check on the palette, see if it's a little bit transparent, and there we go. You can see, you can use the white of the palette to check that, so I know I've got it at the right consistency. And now what I need to do is apply it to the blade with as few motions as possible. So what I'm going to try and do is cover as much of the blade as I can. So there we go, one side, and then on the other. And then there's just a few little bits to catch down there. And there we go. Now if you can still see some of the grey undercoat showing through, which I can just a little bit around there, all you need to do is just let this dry, then apply a second thin coat in exactly the same way. With that base coat applied, we're now ready to begin building up the effect on the sword. And to do this, we're going to be applying a number of glazes to the blade. And we're going to begin by doing this with Sotek Green, but diluted with Lahmian Medium. And the reason why we're using Lahmian Medium here instead of water is it allows us to dilute the paint without really changing its properties. So it'll result in it drying much smoother than it would do with water, which is perfect for the technique that we're doing here. I'm going to be doing this with a medium layer brush. I'm going to start out with a little bit of Sotek Green so you can see exactly how dilute I'm making this. I'm just getting a small amount of that onto the palette. And then I need to get some medium, and we want quite a lot here because this needs to be very thin and quite runny. So I'm going to get one brush full there, and then a second brush full there, and then I'm putting it next to the paint there because now I can start mixing them together and control how strong that actual paint's going to be. So I want it quite runny, kind of like that. You see, it appears quite watery, but then before applying it to the miniature, you must make sure you don't put on loads because right now it'll run out of control. So use some tissue to get rid of the excess paint, then pick up a small amount. And then you can see there on the palette just how thin that is. So now ready to start applying it to the sword. Now the application for this is going to be kind of almost like a checkerboard. We're going to be applying it to one side on one side of the blade and then to the lower side on the other side of the blade. So I'm going to start from the tip on this side and bring the colour down to around about there, just above that nodule, so you can see how far down that's gone. On the opposite side of the blade, and then to start about there and go all the way down to the very base this time. And there we go, like that. So you can see it's actually a very, very thin coat of that. It doesn't take very long to dry at all, but it immediately starts blending into the colour beneath. So I'm just going to let that dry, and then we'll apply another coat and start to build up the effect. That first coat is dry, and you can see it's actually barely noticeable, but this is good. It's exactly what we want, because now we're going to apply a second, but in a slightly reduced area. So this time, on this side of the blade, I'm going to stop a little bit further up, so about there. And on the other side, I'm going to start a little bit further down and go all the way down to the base. So as I add more coats like this, the colours are gradually going to get stronger and stronger. And we want to add enough coats on so that we start getting a solid Sotek Green appearing around about halfway to 2/3 of the way down the blade on that side and the opposite on the other side. Now it's not uncommon for this to take quite a few coats, potentially about 8, but you just need to keep on going, taking your time, slowly building up that colour. Once you've built up the Sotek Green to this point, you're then ready to move on to the next few colours to carry on building up this technique to get lighter and lighter and further towards white on either side of the blade. The next colour we need is Thunderhawk Blue, which again we're going to be diluting using Lahmian Medium, and then after that we'll need some Fenrisian Grey, once again diluted, and then some Ulthuan Grey, again diluted as well. But first of all we're going to be using Thunderhawk Blue, and the application is just like before, so we just need to get a little bit of this paint onto the palette, so there we go. And then get plenty of that Lahmian Medium so you can heavily dilute this to make it really thin, just as we did previously. So there you go, one brush full, and then two, and mix those together, and there we go. So that looks a little bit too thin to me actually, so I'm just going to get slightly more Thunderhawk Blue. There we go, that's more like it. And then as before, we just got to make sure we don't apply too much at once. So just get rid of the excess paint off any tissue, load up a small amount, and then we're ready to start applying it. So as before, we want to look at either side of the blade, but gradually going further and further towards either end. So this time I'm going to be painting down to around about there with that first coat, on the other side around about there like that. And as before, just keep on building this up with 8 coats or so. Once you've finished with Thunderhawk Blue, you can then move on to Fenrisian Grey, once again dilute with Lahmian Medium and repeat this technique, but as before, a little bit further towards each end of the blade, and as before, applying many thin coats to really slowly build up that colour. And then finally, add a little bit of Ulthuan Grey, once again diluted with Lahmian Medium, just towards the very end of the blade. So on this side, it's going to be just the very tip there, and just on the very base here. Once again, just a few coats to build the colour up so it's a bit stronger at the two extremes. Now, once you've done this, if your blade has these little energy nodules on like this one does, what you just need to do is redefine the one on the lighter side at the base there, using a bit of Stegodon scale green, which you just paint into the recesses, just to make that stand out a little bit more. And there we are with that effect built up. All we need to do is to highlight the blade to finish it off. And for this, we're going to be using Ulthuan Grey first of all on its own this time, and then after that, some white scar. But starting out with Ulthuan Grey, I'm going to be applying it with a small layer brush. And what we're doing here is essentially an edge highlight. So as always, use your palette to get the paint ready, adding a touch of water so it's nice and smooth. And then make sure that your brush isn't overloaded by just twisting it on the palette and bringing the bristles to a nice point. And what we need to do here is first of all, just pick out the little energy node that we got down here. So these ones you just pick out. Central part of it there, and also this part going down to the base of the hilt just there. But also we need to edge highlight it. So this is going to be all the way around the edge, all the way down to the very base like that, just very gently to get the nice smooth line. And also we need to do the central part of the blade as well. And just really take your time as you work down the middle here. And finally, to really finish off the blade, add a fine highlight of white scar just on the very tip. So in this case, we want to go a short distance down either side, like that, and then also a short distance down the middle. And with that highlight applied, the effect of this power sword is complete. So as you can see, it's relatively simple to use this effect, but just remember to apply each of those coats really thinly. But we really hope you have fun using this effect, and we'll see you all again very soon.